Welcome to the Deal Final Corner. So this is your weekly property talk show brought to you by Property Filter, hosted by myself, Guillaume Black, your favorite Frenchman. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Property Filter. It's the highest rated platform to find deals, and we're on a mission to empower all property investor and deal sourcer members to find yet again 1,000 deals this year, like they did last year, thanks to the Property Filter blueprint. And the idea really and the purpose with your Deal Final Corner is to give you more and the best of the available resources by inviting expert guests who will share with you the latest and most current strategies, tactics, and secrets about what actually works right now in terms of finding and making deals and the reality of systemizing and running a high-performance business in property. So it really is my pleasure to introduce to you today to my very good friend, Mrs. Michelle Cairns, to today's Deal Final Corner. So Michelle is a successful property investor with a diverse portfolio, including flats, singlets, HMOs. She's a former teacher, French and Spanish teacher. So we could any time during that call switch into French. So that's just so you know. And she now specializes in creative deal structures, and she's partnered with property investors, with other private investors, using lease options, vendor finance, and other creative strategies of the sort. Michelle is a business partner at YPN, Your Property Network magazine, where she presents and coaches and contributes to the business growth. Since 5 years, she's interviewed everybody on the podcast, so well over 350 property industry experts, and she's launched 5 training communities with 400 plus members on each, and she co-created the Property and Entrepreneur Summit that sold out just last month, which also had 400 attendees, featuring some industry top speakers, and I'm glad I was there too. So I'm very, very happy and excited to have Michelle today. So what can we expect from today's episode? So how can you get clear on what makes a great deal for you right now? How can you have a look at different ways and the greatest ways to add value, and how you can understand why your strategy must fit your life goals and just not go after whatever people talk about or the latest shiny penny. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing Michelle and listening to her talk today. So please give a massive Property Filter virtual welcome to Mrs. Michelle Cairns. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you, Guillaume, and lovely to see so many of you here today. I will just share my slides just so I've got that up on the screen there, so you should be able to see that. Great. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about Deal Academy, and let me start again. Today we're going to be talking about the ultimate deal alchemy and how to create deals that no one else can see. And I've put a picture of a book here with some magic coming out of it, because really what we're going to be talking about today is magic, it's alchemy. And I don't know for you guys, when you first started out and learning about all the different things that you could do in property, there was probably a moment where you were thinking, wow, is that real? Can people really do that? I've never heard about this before. How have I never heard about this? So if you can relate to that, then do let me know in the chat where you're thinking, why didn't they teach this in school? So this is what we're going to talk about today. Lots of tips and tricks for you. As Guillaume said there, my background in French and Spanish teaching, and now property investor development with 40 tenants, mixed portfolio. I like diversification. That's kind of my strategy. My strategy is anything that makes money, right? So we'll be talking a bit more about this, and obviously working with Your Property Network there, interviewing over 350 property industry experts throughout my career in property. And there's some few fun photos there of, it's great to be talking about property and houses and things like that, but also why we're all doing it, right? We're all doing it because we've got a reason why. And my reason why is all about financial, time, and location freedom. The ability to just go off to Spain for a month and relocate, or just be able to go skiing if we want to do that, having that flexible freedom and time there. So how I got started is going to be really important, because the theme of today is getting educated. And the first thing that really was the aha moment for me was about reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. One in the chat, or wave if you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Perhaps you had like a aha moment. You thought, this is, this is crazy. Is this how people get rich? Wow, I never knew this. Wow, it's amazing. There are so many people saying ones in there. And this, I became almost evangelical about this book, because thought, well, how have I got to this age? And I was, teaching, and I thought, no one's ever taught me this. So I, just thought this, I've got my ladder, excuse the property pun here, against the wrong wall here. I was thought I was going to be fast tracked through the education career in terms of school life and become an assistant head and all of that. I thought, wow, I am on the wrong path here. I don't want to end up 68, still in teaching because that was my retirement age. Just seemed crazy for me at the time. I needed a backup plan. So, rich dad, poor dad, penny dropped. I went to some networking meetings. So I Googled property Chester, which is where I'm from. And networking meetings was the first exposure to all of this world of property education that's kind of underground, right? So so many people just don't know about it in the outside world, as I like to call it. But I was literally dropped right in it on my first networking meeting, and I thought, wow, it was all about deal packaging. First one, thought, wow, this makes sense. I'm in, sign me up. This is my way out of teaching, right? I subscribed to YPN, which was part of the meeting there, and by chance, I met the editor of YPN on a 6K mastermind that I did a couple of years later down the line. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a short while. And then Mastermind 26 with Simon Zucci and Pin, I got to 50K for cash flow in 12 months. So for me, education has been a huge driver and really has fast tracked everything that I've done in my property portfolio. So how can education help you guys? What we're going to cover today: how you can create your own deals by becoming a property alchemist. And essentially, what we're going to be talking about is different ways to add value. And I've got a few case studies to bring it all to life for you as well. So, what does a great deal mean for you guys? I'll have a think about that, because we're all different. We all want different things, and we've got different goals, and we've got different resources available. So realistically, that each deal is going to be very objective. We're not going to be able to agree on what a great deal is. So if you've got any ideas in the chat about what would make a great deal for you, then let me know. Afis is just speaking some Spanish in there as well. So okay, Patrick, cash flow and low risk, fantastic. What other ideas have you got there? So about what a great deal means for you. I'll put a few up on the screen as done. So um, it's really important to get clear on what is important to you, right? So if the ROI is the most important thing, then make sure that that is your number one thing in your criteria when you are filtering out these deals. But also realize that you need to look at each deal in a very holistic way. So 60% ROI, is that a good deal? Is that a good deal? Let me know in the chat if 60% ROI would be a good deal for you. We've got a few more coming in here. We've got Keith saying replacing my income, so cash flow. Yeah, Jared saying no money in, fantastic. Keith is saying getting time for myself. Hemi saying 20% below market value, ROI, cash flow ROI. Okay, amazing, right? So interesting that quite a few of you have said about no money in being a great deal for you. So there's lots of things to consider when looking for a deal for yourself, but ultimately, what value can you bring to a deal? Okay? So it depends is the answer. So I'd like to think of this scenario now. So 60% ROI, a few you put there, yeah, that would be great. Imagine that it's the perfect strategy in the perfect area and it's giving you 60% ROI, but it's a development of an ex-care home that costs 1.2 million and you've got no experience, no funds, and no team in place. So is it a good deal? Yes, but not for you and not right now. If you've got no team and you've got no funds, like how could you do that, right? You'd have to go out and find the team or the funds. So it's understanding that it's important to match your criteria and your resources to the deal. That's why it's really important to figure out what makes a great deal for you. So first of all, what resources do you have available right now? Time, of course, money, education. Now, when we say money, it doesn't have to be your money. It could be other people's money. It could be the bank's money. Education, experience, team or network, skill set, and then match the deal to the resources that you have got available right now. So this obviously goes along with what we're talking, what Guillaume talks about with everything to do with property filter is filtering out. You don't have time to waste looking at X care homes that are 1.2 million. Focus on the deals that are accessible to you and that match your criteria right now. Now, it might be in the future that you might get some experience by working with somebody else, you might get more education, you might get more money or whatever, and then your criteria will change, but be clear on what is available to you right now. Okay. Mary is saying one large deal that creates 6 figures. Yeah, great if you can access it. Yeah. Lafisa is saying positive income, asset growth, replacing my income. Mary saying a villa in the sun, multi-generational holiday lets, around 10 beds. Amazing. Yeah, great ideas, guys. So feel free to take screenshots of this, come back to this and watch the recording because I know it seems simple, but once it kind of clicks what you've got access to and how you can add the value, then you start seeing deals where there wasn't any before. Okay. So where to start? We all know this. Don't look for houses. We're looking for motivation. So the reason that we're looking for motivation is because this is where you become a property alchemist, is because these situations where the seller is more motivated should give you the best opportunity to structure a deal that works for you and the seller. So this is where the magic is in, because you have the opportunity to then negotiate, the best opportunity to negotiate and create a deal where there wasn't one before. And we're going to be talking about creating deals by solving problems. So either solving problems physically in the property, perhaps, or with the vendor themselves. So finding out what is important to the seller is, it is where you start. The first question you'd ask is, why are they looking to sell? What's going on? And then you can match your education, your experience, etc., to what they need. So adding value through education, the more tools that you have, the more valuable you can keep making these deals. You keep learning about how to add value to a deal. Now, the things that we're going to be talking about today, you might not need right now. One day in the future, you're going to think, oh, I remember seeing something. There was this lady on, and she was talking about this one thing, and that can actually change the entire structure of a deal and how you negotiate. But a word of warning, don't take on problems that you can't fix. So picture here of a lovely pylon in the garden, right? So fine to solve problems, but don't take the problems that you can't fix. So let's dive into some case studies, and then at the end we'll extract how I've kind of created a deal. Now, a 10-bed HMO purchase lease option. If I'd have just bought this, let's say it was on the open market, which it wasn't at the time, but it was on the open market for £350,000, I would have had to have called the agent and made an offer. Perhaps I could have negotiated, but I still would have needed the deposit money, I would have needed some stamp duty, I would have needed money for refurbishment, I would have needed some time, I would have had to have gone on bridging, because then I would have done the refurbishment, and then so there's all the extra cost, hassle, time before I could have tenanted it. That never happened, right? So here is an example of how you can create your own deal. This one was actually found through a sourcer, and it was an empty, tired student HMO in the middle of the city centre in Chester, and it was presented to me as a rent-to-rent deal. So as a friend of mine, he said, Michelle, I've got too many projects on at the moment. This one looks good, but it's not for me right now. Are you interested? I said, well, 10 beds, I rent to rent. Needs a lot of work doing to it. It's not really for me. It's not really a deal for me. It needs too much money, and it's not. I can't really see it working as a rent to rent. But I said, you know what? I'll go and have a look and see what we can do. The owner's story that they were retiring landlords have had the property in their portfolio for years, but it was empty, and they didn't want the hassle. They didn't want to fork out to do all the refurbishments and then keep it in the long term. So we had an independent valuation which came out as 350,000. But while I was speaking to them, I asked them a question that my friend, the sourcer, never asked. And that question was, this all sounds great, but would you be interested in selling in, within a couple of years? And they said, well, actually, yeah, we were going to, but we don't have to sell right now. But yeah, in a couple of years, we're probably going to sell. So I said to them, amazing. Well, how about we, instead of doing this rent to rent thing where I'm just a managing agent, how about we agree a price today, lock that in, and I take it on. So I take all the hassle. So all, if the boiler goes and if the roof something happens and everything like that, I take it on for 5 years, and then I've got 5 years to buy it at the price we agreed. Plus, you get the income. Now, the income we agreed was £1,500 a month. Over 5 years, that equates to £90,000 extra. So they're getting the 350 plus they're getting the 90,000 and they're getting no hassle. So when the boiler failed, yeah, I paid for it because it's essentially I was, the property was mine, leasing it, right? So we agreed 350,000. This was 5 years ago on a 5-year option. So actually, just the other week, I had this valued and it came back 525,000. How? How did we add so much value in that time? I'm going to talk about that now, right? So on the face value, this wasn't a deal, but I've created a deal because I've asked the right question. So I want you all to like make a mental note if you've got pen and paper. Asking the questions can make you money and make you a deal. Yeah. So you can imagine a Magnolia student place. We knocked down the wall on the kitchen, did a light refurb on it. Again, I didn't have the money for a refurb. I worked with investors on this. Increase the rents there. So can I ask you to have a think about tell me how much you think I might have added value to this. So we actually had, bearing in mind, we've had it 5 years, right? So at the beginning, I had the rooms looking like this, and it's in a great location. As you can see, great size rooms. So they kind of just flew off like 5 years ago. I didn't have to do anything to it. Great rents, no problem. And then I was working with, you might have come across Julian Maurice. If you haven't heard of him, he should definitely come and do a talk with him. And he talks about, how you can transform your properties and transform your rents by doing a simple upgrade to the interior design and how the tenants feel in the properties, etc. So how much extra do you think that we can get from just upgrading a room like this? Yeah, Hafiz is saying 15, 20%. Tim saying 70%. Yeah. So on a room like this, we were able to actually increase the rent by £125 per month. Now, average that out over 10 rooms. Suddenly, if we talk about £100, I think it was a bit extra than that, but £100 a month over 10 rooms, suddenly that's an extra £1,000 a month pure profit on the bottom line. £12,000 a year. You've got a commercial valuation because this is a commercial property. It's sui generis, it's in Article 4, and it's 10 beds, so it goes for a commercial valuation around 8 times the annual rent. Suddenly, you're adding value £96,000 on the valuation. So we went for the maximum rents. As people left, we did the rooms out. As they left, we did the rooms up. We commanded the highest rents in the area because we were offering, services. We were offering a great room, even things like all the toilet roll was included to make it feel like a home, not just, a house share. So all of that meant that we can get higher rents, which meant we can get higher valuation and we can add value. So this is a great one because you can see that the value added was in the rental income. The 5 years, just because it was 5 years, so the price, the value of the property went up, and doing a refurb as well. So we added a bathroom, light refurb, 40k or so. But at the beginning, 5 years ago, there was no deposit needed, there was no stamp duty needed, and I had an investor who funded the refurb. So for me, I've created this deal from thin air. It didn't exist. It didn't exist for the sourcer who brought it to me. That was the best. I think I paid him like 3K for that deal, the best 3K I've ever spent. So I want you to be thinking about how you can create deals that work for you, whatever situation it is. So that might be that you've got a pot of money and you don't need to be creative, but also, why wouldn't you? Even if you had a couple £100,000 in the bank, like why wouldn't you do it this way? So why would you tie up money when you wouldn't have to, right? Um, Guillaume, I've lost track of the time. How long do I have left?
Yeah, you're all good. You're all good. You got
Okay.
40 minutes or whatever
Okay,
you want.
perfect.
We are quite
Perfect.
relaxed, Michelle. Don't worry.
Okay. I'm in teacher mode, sorry guys, but feel free to ask any questions as we go
Yeah, it's
along,
okay. Yeah,
okay?
all good.
So let's have a look at the questions. How did the investor payback work? Great question, Donna. So I paid the investor back from profits. It worked out for the first like 18 months or so, and then everything else was just pure profit after that. Steve says, if you're doing a refurb under PLO with investor cash, how do you get the cash if you don't own them? So actually, I borrowed £12,000 from somebody I'd never met through social media. I just put something up saying, hey, I've got an opportunity. I'm doing this. Is anyone interested? Crazy. £12,000, obviously no security for that. They got theirs back very quickly within the first year, and I very cheekily, hey, if you don't ask, guys, you don't get, right? I said to the owner, listen, I don't have the money to do the refurb for this, so I'm going to be working with investors, and would you consider contributing to the refurb? Because it means I can go quicker and I can, be up and running, etc. So they put in £6,000 towards the refurb. Okay, great. And I did it in stages. Yeah. So as obviously the kitchen and the bathrooms had to be done, but there was other things like an additional bathroom that I did later on, etc. And then I borrowed £6,000 from my best friend as well. And so they all got paid back pretty quick. And then the money from obviously once it was tenanted, the money was coming in then. So yeah, Steve. So actually, we didn't need to wait. Just paid them back through cash flow. Mary saying, did you need to get planning for a 10 bed? So remember, it was already a 10 bed HMO. It already had a license. It was just that it was so tired, all the magnolia, the pine furniture, that brown sticky carpet. It was empty. Nobody wanted to live there. So yeah. And also, an important point is that 10 beds, I was thinking, all right, for students, okay, maybe you get two groups of 5 in there, but actually, do 10 professionals want to live and share a house together and the bathrooms and everything? I wasn't really sure. So I said, listen, there were 2 small rooms, still compliant within the 6.52 meter squared, regulations. But they were kind of like our smallest single rooms. There was 2 of those. And I thought, you know what, these are going to be the last to go. I need to take them out completely of my figures and just work the numbers on 8 rooms as if it was an 8 bed. And if they go, then it's a bonus. So I worked all my figures out originally on that, and it worked. It stacked. But guess what? Those 2 rooms were the first to go, and they went while there were still paint buckets in the middle and there was no furniture. I got people round and signed up before there was even any furniture there. So yeah, it was a bit crazy, that one. So can we all see how we can add value, how we can create a deal from scratch, all based on education, right? And just understanding, asking the right questions. And just before I finish on this one, I've got this revalued, obviously 525,000, which the maths on that, so we're getting 75% loan from the bank. So the bank are lending us the money on the market value. That loan, the 75% pays off the owner, and there's some money still left over as well. But also the stamp duty, because this is a commercial agreement. The commercial agreement means that I'm not paying the residential stamp duty. I'm paying a reduced rate for a commercial agreement. Now, that's something that somebody told me the other day, one of my mentors actually. I think that saved us about £17,000. Just that one piece of information, just, you know, just be collecting all of these little tips, because that just creates, again, it's just adding more value. If I hadn't have known that, I would have just carried on and paid the full stamp duty. So really important to look at all these creative ways. Okay, next one is vendor finance. And again, on the face of it, it was not a deal for me. It's a 3-bed terrace in the middle of Chester, just near the train station. Again, brought to me by a different sourcer. This time again, he brought to me as a rent-to-rent purchase lease option. He wasn't quite sure, hadn't had a meeting with the owner, just sent out some some letters, and this one had come back. But again, he was too busy on other projects, and he said, "Do you want to look at this?" Yeah, sure, have a look. So I went into the conversation thinking this could be a purchase lease option, but the owner was tired. It's kind of retired, and thought, and they just wanted to get rid of the property. It seemed it had fallen through twice already, and each time she told the tenants that the house was, going to be sold. So the tenants left, some of them, and then she was like down on her money, so she was just fed up and she just wanted to get rid of it. It was actually rented as, so even though it's 3 beds, the front room here was rented as a bedroom, and it was a minimo basically. So tenanted from day one as a minimo. So the deal was, it was market value 160,000. I negotiated, negotiated the price to 135. I said I can buy this with cash with an investor, and it was really clear. This is not. I don't have the funds myself. I work with investors. If you want to just get rid of this now, I'll buy it. Right? Sourcing fee to my friend there, £2,000, meant the deposit would be 33,500. Now, I know this is cheeky, guys, but I said to her, um, I said, well, I'm working with investors. Would you be interested in being my investor and lending me the money to buy your house? And she said, yes. Is that crazy? So I said to her, what are you going to do with the money when you sell? And she said, I'm going to, go on holiday and buy a new car and then put the rest in the bank. And I was like, well, I could give you a great return if you're interested, and you can lend me the money. In fact, she was going to lend me the whole amount. Then COVID hit, and we agreed 25 in the end. So I had to look down the back of the sofa and find £8,750 to buy this house. I didn't have the money myself, and although I was working with investors, I didn't actually have anyone lined up at the point of this conversation, or I didn't need to, right? So that, because of the time it took to go through the legals, just the conveyancing, I managed to find somebody to fill the rooms. So from day one, that was tenanted, that was bringing in money, and the 5 years, I've got one more year. So I borrowed the 25,000 from her for 5 years, and we agreed I'd pay her £5,000 back each year at 5%. I said to her, hey, what's your money making in the bank? And she said, lucky at like 1-2% back then. And I said, well, what would be a good rate for you that you'd feel comfortable with? And she said 5%. And I worked it out. I said, yeah, I can make that work. So again, cash flow from the property goes towards paying that back. And yeah, I've got one more year on paying it back, and then that's it. Then I think, do you know what? I don't know what the GDV on this is now, like the market rate. I think it'd probably be closer to 200,000, because there's just hardly any. City centre Chester, and the properties in this area have just gone up so much. You know what happened after she sold the house is that COVID hit straight away. And you know what, I still meet up with her. It was her birthday the other day. I've sent her some flowers, and she's like, I'm so glad, I just wouldn't have wanted to have gone through COVID and had to sort everything out. And she got to go on her dream holiday and buy, a nice car, and have the money left over. So she's really happy with the deal as well. Okay, so moving on to the next case study. block of flats. In fact, before we do that, let me just check any questions. Darren is saying, interesting, can you expand on the SDLT thing? Do you mean it because... Yes, Darren. So because you're doing it it's because I'm not purchasing a residential, I'm purchasing it from a commercial agreement. So it's not exempt from the SDLT, but it is a reduced commercial rate, basically. So I would definitely look at somebody who specialises in stamp duty, tax advice, and you basically need to get them to say yes, this is possible, and then you take that to the solicitor, and yeah, so that's it. How did you go about finding investors? This is a sticking point for me right now. So investors networking, just turning up, and don't go to like 10 different networking meetings. If you go into a networking meeting, making sure that you're speaking to people. If you go to a networking meeting, try and connect with people before, during, after, so that it's not just kind of one time, and make sure you're clear about what it is you're looking for, or asking them what they're looking for as well, and just collecting people who are interested, then taking it the next step and building a relationship so that they can see you're commenting on their social, and it's like, oh, okay, that person's still there, that person's still there. Oh, I'm seen at that meeting. Oh, that's that person, at a, take a screenshot of what we're doing today and post it on social media. People can see that you're investing in yourself first, because that's really important. Because when you do speak to an investor, if they are a serious investor and they're used to lending money out, they're going to know really quickly whether you're credible and you've got some experience, or you've got some education, because of the way that you talk about deals and the way that you can show that you're adding value. Now, can you imagine if I'm working with investors on deals like this, that they can see actually that there's not much risk. Now, these two case studies, there's the values are quite low comparatively, but I'll show you another one next where it's much higher. So yeah, I think the advice with Darren would be just get out there and find people that you like. I had the HMO. I've obviously approached different people about lending me some money for the refurb, and this one guy was like, yeah, I've got the money, but he wanted to know all the ins and outs of everything, which was fine. But I'm really glad that I never borrowed the money from him, because we just didn't really gel, and you get on with different types of people. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're not just borrowing the money because it's the only person. Like, ideally you want to have like a great relationship with an investor, that somebody's on the same terms of you as well. Mark saying, can you explain a bit more about how the vendor finance works in respect of mortgage lenders? Yes, so this is really important, Mark, is that you get the correct sequence in place. So I actually borrowed the deposit money from another investor at the time of the transaction, and then the owner got their funds from the sale of the house, and then in a completely separate and unrelated transaction, she decided to lend me some money once the property had sold. So you just have to make sure that those two transactions are completely separate. So yeah, working with investors is certainly a way of creating deals that you might not have had access to before. Yeah. Okay, this is one of my favorites. Block of 5 flats, and again, on the face of it, it was not a deal for me. Now, for those of you who are down south, you're going to be like, what, £153,000 was that per flat? No, so that was for a block of 3 flats, and I didn't have any funds available. Somebody sent it to me. It was in auction, said, hey, this is in your neck of the woods. Have a look at this, it looks good. So I was like, right, okay, but I haven't got any money, right? So it was presented in auction as 3 flats with a large basement. Can't really see here, but this is obviously the garden here, and then below it goes down to like a garden flat at the back with actually a front door to the basement, so full head height, but it was just rubble inside. There was nothing in there. So it was only when I looked into this that I spotted a way to create a deal. Okay, so can you spot it is the question. So ground floor here, this is the entrance, you go through, and the ground floor flat was all recently tenanted, so it was all, you know, people were living there before that. So bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, living room, and another bedroom there. And the basement was the same layout underneath. So anybody want to tell me anything that they can spot? An opportunity. Well, I'm letting you guys think and put some answers in. The original idea was to add a flat to the basement because we thought, wow, this is great, all this space down here, we're going to add a flat and that's going to be great. And I took the plans to the architect and said, what can you do? What do you think we can do here? And they were like, great, let's create this. Well, it would have been a 2-bed, 3-bed flat they could have created downstairs. And yeah, and maybe HMOs, it wasn't actually the area for HMOs, otherwise I might have gone down that route. Sarah's creating a new flat in the basement yet, so the opportunity was to create a new flat. Hafiz is saying stores that could become bedrooms with windows. Yeah. So we kept the floor space the same, right? But watch this. Has anybody any idea what this circle means based on a floor plan? Has anyone seen this on a floor plan before? Any idea what it means? I first saw this on a floor plan. So I mentioned at the very beginning that I did a mastermind, small mastermind, and I was probably about 2 or 3 years in then, and I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I'd never looked at floor plans in my life. I just had never come across them. Why would I? I was teaching French and Spanish. Why would I have ever needed to look at a floor plan? I'd never bought, my own property back then. I was just renting. So I can Abraham saying pizza on the floor. Yeah, absolutely. It is a spiral staircase. And I remember, when you're kind of in these groups and sometimes you think, right, I know this is going to be a really silly question and I'm going to look really stupid, but I'm going to ask it anyway. That's how I felt. I was in this mastermind. It was about 8 or 10 of us. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? And it was a spiral staircase. And they, at the time, were saying it must have been down in London, and they were creating these small studio kind of mezzanine flats or something. And there was this staircase to create the kitchen area, living area with the bedroom stairs. That was just something I learned on a mastermind probably 5 years ago now. It was in the back of my mind somewhere. So when I came to look at this floor plan, I was like, well, here we've got a bedroom, but look, on the ground floor, you've got to go through to get upstairs to the other flats. This bedroom was like on its own. So I was like, I said, well, what if we just put a spiral staircase and block this off? So we've got 2 flats, not just one. And they said, yeah, I guess we can do that. Okay, so suddenly we've added an extra flat to this property. So now it's not 3 flats or 4 flats, now it's 5 flats. So that one idea, guys, but in the end we ended up putting there was room to put a full staircase, not the spiral one, but in that one idea, added £80,000 of value. One idea from something I'd learned years ago. Nobody else thought of it. The architect didn't think of it. The JV didn't think of it. The builder didn't think of it. I asked a question, could we just do this? And they said yes. So 153,000 for the purchase price. Build cost came in at 150. Obviously, there was extra costs because there was 2 bathrooms and 2 kitchens. So let's call it an extra 30k of costs. So it probably added an extra £50,000 of profit to that one idea. Total cost 356,000. GDV came in at 540, but it was COVID, so they actually only lent us 342,000. Cash left in 13.5. Monthly rental income 3 grand. Profit just over £1,000. By the way, that profit there is what I used to earn from teaching in 1 month. Crazy. That's a life-changing deal. That, you know, was it. I was able to leave teaching, not actually on that one, on a couple of previous, but that is a game-changing deal from one property. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, but I haven't got 356 grand. Well, I didn't either. I actually worked with an investor who had a SAS pension fund. Now, the great thing about bigger projects is that if you borrow the whole amount, yes, we actually borrowed the amount for the legals, the solicitors, the deposit money, and in auction, and the refurb costs. So we borrowed everything. I think it's about 1% a month. And because we were borrowing such a large amount, it meant that we could offer the investor a first charge. So it's the best security you can offer. So sometimes it's actually easier to borrow the full amount because you can give a first charge and the best security rather than trying to borrow 50,000 or 30,000 where it's like, okay, how am I going to pay this back? So there we go. That just came from a meeting, from a networking, and I stood up and said, I'm looking to work with investors, anyone here? And he was like, yeah, I've got £1 million in my SAS pension fund. What have you got? Abrams, pulling up some staircases there. Hemi, the project took longer than we all wanted. Hey, if you know, most projects cost twice as much and take twice as long, right? Sadly, this was we started it, COVID hit, everything shut down, so it did take much longer. However, the benefit of working with a private investor was obviously he understood, he wanted his money back, he wanted the project to work, and bless him, he said, listen, I'll put the interest on hold until, and we didn't really know how long for at the time, but we couldn't get in at that point. The contractors were working on a very limited time schedule, etc. So he put the interest on hold for a couple of months. But that's the difference of working with a private investor or working with the bank, where they're just like, no, sorry, need the funds back. Would have been a very different story, I'm sure. But hey, COVID, that's how it was there. So yeah, it probably took about 18 months all in all. Should not have taken that long. And there was things like dry rot that we found. So we thought the upper flats, we thought we were just going to do a light refurb. In fact, the original plan was to sell it, just to kind of go in, do a flip and sell, but then COVID hit. Actually, it worked out quite well for me. So yeah. So Darren, what was the initial budget? The initial budget was around just under 100, I think. So yeah, we did go over. Yeah, so Hemi, like I say, we expected the upper floors just to be a straight refurb and then go in and do one flat. So we had to literally take the ceilings out and go back to brick. Yeah, light refurb would have just been replacing kitchens and bathrooms, carpets, etc. But we ended up doing a lot more work. But we were lucky because we added the extra flat, so that added value, and because of COVID, the prices did rise as well. So that was good as well. So yeah, all in all, it ended up working out. So yeah. So coming back to our theme of adding value through education, yes, there are ways of adding value to the property itself. For example, planning gain. Now, on that property with the flats, we could have just got planning for the basement and then put it back into auction and not done any work, not touched it, just got the planning and put it on. That would have been a great deal, right? It would have been a deal like no one else had thought of that. It was just sat in auction on its own, just there as 3 flats. So yes, we could have done the planning gain. Yes, we could have done the refurbishment. You can add the rents. You can do extensions up, down, wherever. But they are kind of the most obvious ways of adding value. I'd like you guys to be thinking of how you can add value to the deal, structure the negotiation. So how can you add value to deals? So here are a few ideas for you. Obviously, if you can negotiate getting a BMV below market value, you could get an option agreement, which makes it would make something a deal that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. If you've got an option agreement, it might be the length of agreement, might be 1 year, might be 5 years, might be 7 years. I've got one on a 7-year contract. Vendor finance, again, down to negotiation. So the questions that you ask, does the person selling, do they want to be an investor with you? Right, that's just a question. That meant that she lent me £25,000, one question. Perhaps as a rent-free period. I also asked for a rent-free period. You're going to think I'm really cheeky, right? But if you don't ask, you don't get. So I asked for 8 weeks rent-free period. They said yes. Okay. Government grants and loans as another property I didn't talk through today, but in one of the areas that I invest in, there is a loan scheme available, which is £25,000 per unit for 5 years, 0% interest. That's actually recently gone up to £35,000 per unit. Now, the block of flats I had on with one was a block of 4 flats. So 4 flats, £25,000. Yes, I borrowed £100,000 from the local government at 0% for 5 years to develop that property. Do you think that made a difference to the deal stack? You bet it did. Probably saved us about 70 grand of finance over that time. So look out for, and that was something that I learned from reading in YPN magazine, all of these little things that people just generally don't talk about. Just be collecting them. The more things, the more tools, the more tips, the more things that you can be thinking about, and be a complete game changer in making a deal or not. Questions. Darren says, what is the government grant specifically? So there are 2 things. Now every area is different, so you just have to have a look at what's happening in your area. In this particular area, there was money coming in to regenerate the area, so you can imagine it's not, there's not going to be a lot of capital appreciation there. However, the government are keen to regenerate the area, so it's called an empty homes loan, the one we had. And get this, guys, empty homes, the criteria was it had to be empty for 6 months. Crazy. So yeah, so empty for 6 months, and sometimes there's restrictions about who you rent it out to afterwards. On this one, there wasn't one. So empty homes loan or grants, the one in another council on the other side of town for me, you get a £5,000 grant. That's it, but you don't have to pay it back. So yeah, just check out. So have a look. I would encourage you to contact the empty homes officer in your area, because they've got a list of all the empty homes, as you would imagine. But their job is to get these homes back into action, right? Back habitable again. So they've got a list, and my officer, he contacts me and say, hey, this is coming up, because they have the ability to force the sale of a property if the owner doesn't respond, if they can't find the owner, or the owner's not doing anything with it and it's just sat there. So they can force the sale and they'll let you know first. Amazing. So yeah. And then we talked about some stamp duty reductions. I am no stamp duty expert at all. However, I do know there are a number of them. For example, if you are buying through probate, there is some reductions there. There's like rates based on different criteria. Probate, even if the sale has fallen through, and we all know how many times sales fallen through, and on Property Filter you can see how many times it's fallen through. So you can just take that to your tax advisor and say, hey, this property has fallen through. Can you look at this for stamp duty exemptions, reductions, whatever? And another one is multiple dwellings relief as well. I'm not sure if that falls into the same category, but I think we've got multiple dwellings one on the block of flats. So yeah, different ways there to add value. So action points for you guys: collect these ideas to add value, look at what else can be done to a property, and think outside of the box. Don't just take, even if you're talking to an architect, don't just assume that they know better than you. Just always ask that question and ask it. So key learnings is invest in your education, because it just pays back so much, over the years. The compound effect, incredible. Invest in your network, and I always say, build your network before you need it, because you don't want to be in a position where you've got a deal and you've got no investors and you've got no experience and nowhere to take it to. You need somewhere to be able to get your questions answered. Otherwise, it's very lonely and it's a hard slog. Don't do it like that. And then invest in yourself. It can be, I've just obviously today I've only had short time to talk about the highlights. I've tried to talk about the things that went wrong as well. And if it was easy, everyone would be doing it right. But things do go wrong. They will go wrong. Expect them to go wrong. And you need resilience in yourself. You need to have that support network and have that mindset of like, hey, you know what? We can solve this problem. How do we solve it? Let's be creative and let's think outside the box. So investing in yourself, I think, is really important. And expect a roller coaster. Some days you're up, I had a great valuation. Some days you're down, something goes wrong, and you're like, oh God. It is a roller coaster, and that's just the way it is. If you want nice, steady, even line of emotions, go and work in a bank or go and work in a supermarket or something where it's predictable. You know what you're expecting every day. You know what's coming in every month. But we all know that on a the hospital, when you get plugged in the lifeline, up and down means you're alive, flat line means you're dead, right? So I'm sure you guys are all here because you want something extra. You want something like different than just the average day job, right? So it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And there were times where I thought, wow, I am completely out of my depth here. I took on, like refurbs before I understood what was going on, before I had the education. And let me tell you, it was really tough. But I thought in those moments, like, what's the alternative? What's the alternative? I can't go back to teaching. I can't give it up. I've got to make it work somehow. And like, thankfully, just being part of communities like this is so important. I'm kind of talking to the converted here, I understand, because you're all here with me. So yeah. So that's it. I was going to offer you a free 30-day trial to YPN. Obviously, I'm from YPN here today. And if you want to get educated, if you want all of these bite-sized bits of information, all these top tips, then I've got a special offer for you, which is 30 days free. We have got a deal clinic every month with John Howard. You might know him. So you can bring a deal, pitch to our investors, pitch to John. We've got Money Monday talking about mortgages, tax and funding, got a networking meeting, the digital magazine, an app dating 8 years of back catalogue of topics, all of these things that I've talked about today, all in there. Deep dive case study, bite-sized training, lots of discounts as well. So that's freebie for you guys today. I'll put that link in the chat for you. And I will take any questions that you've got. Guillaume, how are we doing for time?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Michelle. I think people were a bit mind blown by this stamp duty thing. And most people don't know about their local authority grants and things like that. So it's really, really cool to remind people of that. And it's only worth something if you use it, So well done to you to making the most of it. I had the question. I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, you said about if you don't ask, you don't get, and then definitely it's probably the most useful advice for negotiation. And sometimes it's very much the basic stuff that we miss out. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever come across the recordings of like when they on like NBA or when people like play basketball and they've got this timeout and they are all together with the coach, and you hear those recordings of what they talk about, and it's all the basic stuff, you know. It's like, we're gonna get the ball on the other side, you know. Like, it's all like really, really basic stuff, and we tend to forget these things. And same in golf, you know. If you look at some of the best in the world, even the best in the world have coaches, you know, and they pay these people to tell them the basic stuff, you know, keep your head down, you know, and it's quite interesting. So I think there's a lot, you know, with if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't ask, you don't get. You know, it's all these basic things we tend to forget, and we think we need a system or we need something very complicated. So I think that was really really awesome. So thanks a lot for that. And then yeah, I think the grants, the finance, the way to position it, and what was the other bit? There was a third bit around the stamp duty. So yeah, that was
Yeah,
awesome.
I think yeah, you're right, Gum, and you know, just even the grant, the loan available from the council. If you know that a specific area has got a loan available, then you know, go look on Property Filter for that area. Does that change the way that you look at a deal that's just sat there and nobody else is looking at it in the same way as you are? You're looking at it, and whether it's a deal for yourself or you're working with investors or you're sourcing deals, you're adding the value by saying, "Hey guys, have a look at this," but also it makes it a deal because you've got this loan available. So um yeah, I just love it. I love creating deals. I love the hustle. I love
Yeah, yeah.
just thinking outside the box. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been great working with you the last couple of years, and yeah, I agree. I concur with what you're saying. Well, awesome. Lots of really
Definitely.
cool feedback as well in the chat. So yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, if there's anything that stood out for you guys, let me know. I've touched on lots of different things today, and there's, gosh, you know what, 9 years worth of things I could talk about. But I think particularly for you guys who are part of Property Filter, that understand, because I think it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, even when you filter out the deals and you're like, okay, there's like, I don't know, 30, even you got, let's say, 38 motivated sellers and they're like 5 stars and they're like back and reduced. Where do I start with that? Like, what actually, once you get good at thinking, okay, I can look at this layout, this floor plan, and I can spot something, or that's in that particular location with the grant, I can spot that, or or you have that conversation with the vendor and you're able to ask those questions that nobody else is asking because you're direct to vendor or because you're with the agent, but you're conveying, you know, credibility and you're asking questions that no one else is. That's what's going to set you apart, and is what is going to help you create the deals where everyone's just like, oh, it was on Rightmove, and you're like, yeah, but look
Yeah,
what I did with
yeah.
it. So yeah,
Hmm.
I can
It's
see Tony in there as well. Hi, Tony.
yeah, yeah. All the team is here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because it's very common. You know, people have got you know, a short list of deals, and then they tend to stay at the surface level of 3, 5, 10, you know, 20 at a time. But really, at some point, you need to decide. You know, like, let's invest in this one. And the idea with, you know, the star system in Property Filter is to give you the ones where they are going to be the most likely to have these interesting conversations. But you need to go a bit deeper. You know, you need to go and have this conversation. So I guess, Michelle, all of those deals you've done, at some point you went and started conversations and you committed to this. You know, you were looking at this one deal for, you know, a period of days and weeks, you know, and committed to this one, and not, you know, been looking at 15 at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, and also, sometimes when we talk about motivated sellers, it's tempting to think of, oh, someone's going through a divorce and then, or they're emigrating, or they're getting repossessed and it's a stressful situation, and you need to go in there and save them, right? Um, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's about presenting them with an opportunity. Like, yes, by all means, solving a problem, but on that property with the 10 beds, actually, if it had sat empty for a year, they didn't have a mortgage on it, so it would have been inconvenient, I'm sure. But they weren't desperate to sell. There was no real kind of pain. I presented them with an opportunity of, hey, you can earn an extra 90 grand out of this, and you get an income for 5 years that if you'd have just sold the property now, you'd be eating into that, the capital for your retirement. Actually, why don't you go on holiday with the money I'm going to give you every month for 5 years, and then you've still got the amount left at the end. Like, that was a huge opportunity for them. So it wasn't like, so think of you know when you're looking and you're negotiating with vendors, it's not always about the about the kind of just people being in a distressed situation. It's about creating opportunities as well as solutions.
Yeah, it's really insightful. Yeah, thanks so much. So solving problems, creating opportunities, and if you don't ask, you don't get. Do you have any closing sentiment for us, Michelle?
I think that's it now. I just encourage you guys to keep going, and it's the more you're all in, we're talking to the converted, as I said, you're all here, you're picking up these tips and learning from people who have have got ways of creating deals and creating funds and working in different strategies. So I would just say, in the moment, it kind of feels like it's slow. I don't know if this is for any of you guys, but you kind of just chipping away, doing these things, and you think, months go by, and you think, I haven't got a deal yet, I haven't got a deal. But actually, sometimes there's like a compound effect, and you're just planting the seeds, you're just chipping away and making those phone calls. And one day you'll look back in 6 months and think, "It's that conversation that I had, 3 months ago that made the difference." So try and kind of look at it as a higher level and look at how much value you're creating, how much you're learning. It will have an impact if you just stick with it. Like, it has to. You do the right things, you get out there, you take kind of big action, and be consistent, right? Consistent with the agents, consistent with your investors, and do that. And yeah, join us as part of the YPN community, and be good to see you on there as well.
Michelle, thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's Deal Final Corner. Do visit Michelle's link if you want the YPN subscription and all the education and bonuses they've packaged for you. So I think it's pretty cool. In the meantime, visit propertyfilter.co.uk, log on to your Property Filter account, check out the deal blueprint where you can define your goldmine area, engage with motivated sellers, assess properties in seconds, load your pipeline and make deals, have an endless supply of deals, join the top 1% and become a high achiever deal finder. I hope you enjoyed today's Deal Final Corner like I did. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.